안녕하세요, 여러분. 반갑습니다. Hi, everyone. I'd like to talk about Chapter 6, Social Influences. Among the social influences, we're going to focus on the families and household, the key influencing factor that formulate consumer subculture and culture and decision making. If you look at this chart, now, are you familiar with this framework? You should be. I have shown these frameworks every single week when I started my lectures. This is called as consumer behavior framework, and it actually includes every variables that is governing the decision making of consumers. If you look at the right side, there is problem recognition, searching information, alternative evaluation and selection, outlet selection, where to purchase, and the purchases, and post-purchase processes. That is the fundamental concepts related to the consumer decision making. We have studied that what kind of factors, what kind of environment influence those decision making processes. Then we went to the internal influences, what made consumers act in such way. So we studied the perception, learning, memory, motives, personality, emotions, and attitude. And these internal influences are determined by consumers' previous experiences of consumer decision making, but also at the same time, these internal influences forms a self-concept and lifestyle. And this self-concept and lifestyle is the core component that governs consumers' needs and desires. And then needs and desires actually leads the consumer's decision-making process. Today, we'd like to talk about the external influences. There are many stuffs that influence consumer self-concept and lifestyle. When you see your friends purchase iPhone or a new MacBook, you want to get it because you want to be similar to your reference groups. When you see your friends and relatives go to the travel to the Jeju Island or Gangneung area, you get to know the news. Oh, I should go there to see the beach and travel of the Jeju, Olekgil, etc. So, we human beings, consumers, interacted with the consumers around, and those social external influences affect our self-concept and lifestyle, therefore decision-making processes. So it is about culture, subculture, demographics, social status, reference groups, family, and marketing activities, something outside of the you. When you look at this yellow, when you look at this orange color part, it's about you, internal influences, your perception, learning, and memory, motivation, personality. But when you look at the blue side, it's about outside of the you. So those external factors, rather than yourself, still affect self-concept and lifestyle. And today, we'd like to focus on the family and household, one of the most important consumption units. When you look at this chapter, we have 5 learning objectives. Number 1 is explain the concept of household types and their influence on consumption. When you read the sentence, you can imagine that there must be different types of household. What are those? And those different types of household influence on consumption differently. Number 2, summarize the household life cycle's various stages and marketing implications. What does this mean? These learning objectives gives you idea. There is a concept called household life cycle, HLC. This is one of the most important concepts you're going to study this chapter, so I really want you to understand this fully. What kind of stages involved in this household life cycle? And does this household life cycle has some kind of implications on the marketing? Number 3, understand the family decision process. What does it mean? It means that as if individual consumers have its own decision-making process, family has also its own decision-making process. It could be different from individual consumers' decision process. So you'll get to know how is dynamic of family decision process differs from the individual consumers. Number 4, describe the role that household play in child socialization. Okay, we do know that one of the important functions that family has, raising child. What kind of roles we do play to teach children, to let them socialize into the society? Number 5, explain the sources of ethical concern associated with marketing to children. Of course, ethical concern matters more as time goes by. Maybe if we have a time remained, we can cover this chapter. Other than that, you can assume that what kind of sources of ethical concern we could have as you study number 4 learning objectives. Okay, what is the household? And how does household influence most consumption decision? The household is the basic purchasing and consuming unit. Therefore, it is important to marketing managers of most product. Let's think about the example. When you say household, I'm going to explain in a minute more deeply. It's more than 2 persons living together, right? So, which means that one person's consumption pattern related to another person's consumption pattern. For example, if there is a child who wants to buy a bicycle, then when parents listen to the request of the first child purchasing a bicycle, meaning that they need to give up for the other brother and sisters purchasing a new clothing, or they give up to go to travel during the weekend, unless you have ample budget. So as a marketer, we have to understand the family as a unit of consumption. Second thing is that household and family plays the role of socialization of consumers. We teach how to use credit card. We learn how to budget, how to spend the money, how to save the money, how to invest the money, or how to go to the supermarket, when, where, what to buy, what not to buy. So basically, family and household becomes a socialization avenue. Also at the same time, the culture, subculture, value, learning system, and behavioral pattern is passing down from the generation to generation in the family. So family is the important mechanism who passes down the value system from the generation to the generation. We look at this household purchase and consumption behavior, we can divide into the 3 sections. 1, structure of household unit, meaning that how it looks like. 2, stage of household life cycle. What kind of stage is your family located? 3, household decision process. Who has the influencing power? Who speaks up? Who initiates the consumption request? Who pays for the money? Who plans to buy certain item? That's the decision process. And these 3 areas of the family would influence consumers' purchase and consumption behavior as a household that draws implication to the marketing. Now, first, types of household. Household consists of all the people who occupy a housing unit, either house, apartment, group of rooms, or single room designed to be occupied as separate living quarters. Family household is one having at least two members related by birth, marriage, or adoption, one of whom is the householder. Non-family household is that householder living alone or exclusively with others to whom he or she is not related. So when we say household, meaning that it doesn't necessarily mean the family, traditional family. Traditional family household is two members, at least two members related by birth, marriage, adoption, etc. But non-family household, such as this is the old data, but you can still see that non-family households are taking up 1/3 of the total population. It's getting larger and larger. And if you Google the data of the South Korea, we have a single household, meaning the one-person household, or less than the two persons living together, or the non-family household are quickly booming, a large segment of the household. Now let's take a look at the traditional family first. When we say traditional family, what does it mean? In academic term, when we use the traditional family, it refers to a married opposite-sex couple and their own or adopted children living at home. But you also do have blended family in academic terminology. It's a family consisting of a couple, one or both of whom are previously married, their children, and the children from the previous marriage of one or both parents. You also have a multi-generational family as well. Multi-generational family is a family household containing at least two adult generations, a grandparent, and at least another generation, meaning that you, your mother, and your grandmother living together, so two adult generations, or only your grandparents and you. That's also the multi-generational family. Even though we didn't cover it fully on the newly emerging family, there are diverse types of family which is not traditional. You also have to take care of those newly emerging sector and what kind of implication does this have onto the marketing or on the family consumption unit. Now, besides the structure of household, let me give you the idea of the household life cycle. What is the household life cycle? This household life cycle originated from the traditional family concepts, and as you understand this traditional view of the family life cycle, you can also get back to the multi-generational family, blended family, or newly emerging family, and you can modify this household life cycles stages relevant to these newly emerging families. The household life cycle is a classification of the household into the stages that it passes over time based on the age and marital status of the adult, whether they have a child and how old are they, the presence and age of children. And the household life cycle is a value of a marketing tool. Why? Because members within each stage or category face similar consumption problems. So it represents potential market segment as well. If you look at this circle, this is a traditional view of family life cycle. So people married by their early 20s, and actually this is a traditional view. So right now, people married by their late 30s or mid 30s or early 30s in South Korean situation, and they get several children. Actually, in these days, they do not have a child, or sometimes they do have one single child or two children. And their children grew up and started their own families. So they leave their initial family and they live independently. Now then, your original couple retired, meaning that the people who married, who started this family, they retired. And the male would eventually die. Why they pointed out the male? Because of the census data, the male lives shorter than the female, so the traditional view of family life cycle has that male would eventually die, and a few years later, the female would die. I know that this cycle fully not explain what's happening right now in South Korea of Seoul or in South Korea, any part of this country, or globally. So the easiest way to understand this household life cycle is that why don't you apply this household life cycle for your family right now in your living? Then gradually you can modify the part of it to explain the current phenomenon of consumers. So think about your parents. If both parents are living still and they're living together, think about when they get married and how many child do you have in your family. And you guys are now growing up. You went to the university, and someday you will be leaving your family, right? And maybe because you are studying at the Chungcheong area, you departed from the initial family and you're living alone already. And someday, or already, your parents may retire and your father or mother could be dying some days, sadly speaking. So that's a traditional view of family life cycle. What does this give? An implication of the marketing. This household life cycle gives us an idea that each stage of the consumption, each stage of household, have a similar needs and desires and problems of consumption. Let me walk you through into detail as an example. So households follow much more complex and varied cycles today than just the traditional view of household life cycle that I just mentioned. But still, the same things happening. Researchers have developed several models of household life cycle, HLC we called. Each HLC stage presents unique needs and wants. Also, they do have different financial condition and experiences as well. HLC, household life cycle, provides marketers with relatively homogeneous household segment that share similar needs with respect to household-related problems and purchases. What does that mean? The marital status in the presence and age of child place requirements in households, such as need for particular types of recreation, shelter, food, car size, and so forth. Many of these problems are resolved by purchasing products and services. Let us take a look at the